I have here all three items of the latest Bellabeautebar collection, and I know I'm a bit late to the party, but that comes down to the reason that I filmed for you 4 looks for this video, because I thought when I have such a big all matte eyeshadow palette, I definitely have to do more than just 2 or 3 looks. So I settled in with 4, and I also have a demo clip for every single one of the blush shades. So that one took quite a while. So let's start with the matte eyeshadow palette. Very interesting concept. This is divided into 2 palettes basically. You have a neutral 2 row here, like 10 shades of neutral, while I honestly have to admit I don't think they're that neutral. There are 2 shades in here that are more on the cool tone side, but if you just cross out the white and the black, I think the main vibe here of these matte shades is warm toned. And then we have the neon rows. Very, very interesting row, but keep in mind, please, that neons are not the easiest to formulate. And if you just cover that neon greeny shade here, that, by the way, has the same color as Made by Mitchell brushes, I don't know if this helps you, but I feel like when you cover this shade, a lot of the special feelings for this palette go away. I'm not telling you this to drag the palette or to tell you that it's a bad one. Definitely not, spoiler. But you know, sometimes when we look at palettes, they can distract us because our main, I don't know, like our main attention is drawn to certain shades. That's why neutral palettes with a pop of color are selling so well. But let's talk about the swatches here. The swatches of the neutral shades, as you can see, they are very nice. I do have to say though that especially, no, not especially, actually all the shades I had to build up. They swatch very, very thin. They are very buildable. They are not as powdery as, for example, a Narimi matte that just goes on punchy after one swipe with the finger, or just goes on very, very intense but easy to blend with a brush. These needed the build-up. The 2 rows of the neons, they needed less build up because they are, because of the nature of neons, way more powdery than the neutrals. Overall, I think all the rows, all the shades swatched nice. I personally don't mind building up the neutrals, so for me, that's not a negative thing. But in that collection, you do not only have these 20 matte shades, you have one of the probably weirdest palettes of all time. First of all, I don't like the fact that it's in this shape. I wish it would have been like 3-3, you know, a bit more squarey-ish. But you have 6 multichrome slash duochrome. No, I think it's mainly multichrome, and also holographic shades. I am blown away by these swatches. I think they look very, very pretty. I will link you also a video from my TikTok slash Instagram down below where I did a like real TikTok thingy filming these with the flashlight on. Absolutely stunning shades. I do want to say though that heat, melt, molten, and drip. Well, mainly these 3. This one, drip, not so much, but a bit, are flaky shades. They are flaky shimmers. They are indie flakes. Not as bad as these 2 weird shades, Froth and Faith, from the Remy, what was it called? Exotic Sheep. I just had to think about this. Or not as bad as Minka from Adapt, but they are flaky. I myself, I will show you that I treat them nowadays as chrome flakes. You know, the Nesomarix chrome flakes, you're not supposed to swipe on and build them. You're supposed to dab them on. The pigment will break up and it will leave a like scattered look. That is how I use these flaky shades now, and that works fine for me, and you see it in the demos. Overall, they have quite an interesting mix of textures. So these three, flaky, dissolve, very velvety, bake, kind of chunky, and drip, somewhat of a mix of chunks and of flakes. None of these words that I now use to describe them is actually meant in a bad way because, spoiler, they apply like a dream. The look that I'm wearing here is the look number 3 of this video because now I have just time to film the intro. But before you had in all the tutorials, and you see then in third place this one, let's talk about the blushes, because the blush palette I actually haven't swatched yet because I mainly forgot to do this. So I thought it's maybe a nice idea to swatch them now. Looking at this blush palette, I'm not gonna lie, I think these 6 blush pans have the perfect balance of pinks, reds, warm and cool. I am impressed by how well done this is, and here on this look, for example, as blush, I'm wearing Macaron. So let's start with the swatches. They feel interesting. They go on a bit chunk powdery like the neons, but they are not neons. So here we have Macaron, very, very nice cool toned pink. Then we have Strudel, or in German it's called Strudel. Cannoli, a warm terracotta brown blush. Shortcake, a very light pink, also in the cool tone family, but a tad bit lighter than Muffin. No, not Muffin, Macaron, because this is Muffin, a intense magenta color. And the last one is Red Velvet. This is the blush that I'm most excited about. Well, actually, I'm excited for all these blushes because they all look freaking good. In the swatches, I think you can see a lot of similarities between these 3, but they do have different depth levels and different levels of their undertones, which makes them in the application in a sheer wash on the cheeks at the end with a fluffy brush, very, very different to each other. So far, when I'm filming this intro, I have used a cannoli and macaron on my face already, and I'm impressed with these. They go on very, very easy, although you can see they are pigmented. A brush does not pick up that much. I'm using Refer 5, so it's quite soft and fluffy for that. Maybe if you use a stiffer brush, that might be a bit too much, but I'm excited. So I'm very, very curious how I will think about this blush palette and everything else. See at first 4 looks in that video, and after the looks you will see 6 short demo clips, mid makeup me doing these blushes, and then in the outro you will get my final review. And that's basically it. So without any further rambling and shit, let's head into the tutorial and demos. Okay, let's begin, and honestly, I want to get the look out of the way that I'm afraid the most of, and that is a look including the neon. So I tap into that neon, green, yellow, whatever. It's very, very bright, and sadly, these don't have names. I don't know why, but I just wish the matte had names too. The shimmers have. And I take that shade and I apply this here on the inner crease part. I want to have the most color here, and then I flick it outwards. That did not go on very well. Here it's skipping certain parts. It's really hard to blend, but it's a thing of neons. I have worked with better ones, I'd say, but let's see how that look moves forward. So I now go into that slight peachy orange here, and that one I start to blend in the middle of my crease and bring it outwards and slightly inwards. And then I go into that rusty brown next to the black here, and that one I apply on the outer crease part, outer V area. And I just try to diffuse it in this area, not bring it too far in. So the glitter glue is applied and I tap into heat now. And I have to do this while the palette is laying down because these three plus drip are very flaky. Like really, really flaky. And I take heat and I start to tap this in the center. And since this is so flaky, I just work in very, very light layers and tapping motions, and I try not to swipe it. I basically started to treat these very flaky shades like the Danessa Myricks Chrome Flakes. These you're also supposed to tap on and not to swipe on because you break them. So to add a bit contrast and shade, I'm taking the Urban Decay Smog Liner and I line my lower waterline with that. So now I'm working a bit different than usual. I go into that neon yellow again and I start tapping this here on the inner corner and I also swipe it on the lower lash line. And it's a bit powdery, so now I have a yellow shadow here at the side of my nose, but that's no problem. I will just dust it off. Next up I go into that reddish brown again. And that one I smudge here on the outer lower lash line, but I don't take it all the way in. And I also take that peach shade again, and that is here in the center and flicking outwards. Basically, I mimic the exact same as on the upper lid. I think if you love a matte inner corner, this neon yellow will do the job here, but I will use Dissolve. And I wiped off that tiny brush I used that neon with, and I use it basically in that shade too. And I tap it here on the inner corner. That was a very, very good decision. And here we have the first finished look. I paired that with the Lisa Eldridge Sculpt and Shade Lip Pencil in the shade 0, and this is becoming my fave. I can't tell you enough good things about this. And I gave the Lisa Eldridge, what are they called? It's not saying here. It's her new like lip balmy thing in the shade Sweet Fig Another Chance. If you watched any of my reviews, I'm very, very disappointed in these because they feel like heavy plasticky. I feel like this has dissolved a bit, so it does not feel as heavy anymore. So hopefully, maybe it was just a freshly opened problem. I don't want to give up on them. First look review, I love it. It's sunny, it's summery, it's light, it's pretty, but it's also me. And although that shade here, what was it? It was Heat, I think. Yes, Heat is one of the very flaky shades. With the tapping technique, it works. So for any future things, I have to remind myself to treat flaky shades like the Nessa Myricks Chrome Flakes, and then they look actually very pretty. So now I'm super excited for the next look. I'm starting with the third shade here in the first row and use this as my transition color. Next up, I go into that very vibrant orange and I apply this throughout the complete crease. And I go into that very warm brown here and apply this on the outer parts of the lid and the crease for depth. Glitter glue is down, and I now go into that Molten shade here. And I apply this all over the lid. Molten also has a flaky texture, but not as flaky as the first two actually. To go with the warmth of this look, I use the Charlotte Tilbury Copper Charge Duo Liner, and I'm using the metallic side. I tap back into that warm brown, and I smudge this across the complete lower lash line. And then I take that neony orange here and I use this to give it a pop of color, and I blend it out too far. Okay. So to not look like a sick puppet now, I have to use the black. That was absolutely not planned, but now I have to correct it. So I take a flat liner brush and I tap into the black and I press this into the lower lash line all across it. And then I slightly flick it out and flick it down a bit. And I also did the tiniest wing, like powdered wing. And I think I can live with that. It's definitely not what I wanted to have. For inner corner highlight, I now tap into Heat and tap this on. And here we have the second finished look. On the lips, I'm wearing the Charlotte Tilbury Pink Venus lip liner. And I topped it off with the Girl Code lip gloss in the shade J805. Although I fucked up that lower lash line and it kind of went everywhere, I think I saved that look quite nicely, but do you see a distinct difference between this and the first look? I maybe have to look back at the photos again, but they do look quite similar. This one is a tad bit darker than the first one. The neon is missing, but overall the vibe is very similar. That Molten shade on the lid, I love it. It is a very, very pretty holographic shade with a very nice base, a chromey shift. Very, very beautiful. So I'm excited now for look number 3. I have a feeling I'm going to regret this look, but I start with that super hot pink here. And I apply this directly in my crease. Oh boy. The 80s called, they want their color back. I'm now going into that light, slightly cool tone shade here. And I use this in the transition area to make the blend a bit softer. I now go into that dark cool tone brown here, and I apply this on the outside of lid and crease. I applied my glitter glue and now I go into the shade Drip and I tap Drip on my lid. I'm lining the lower waterline with Urban Decay Vice, blend it out with that cool tone dark brown, just smudging this here across the lower lash line. This here, where it skips, is not the fault of the eyeshadow. I actually have like a slit there. I don't know. It's like from drawing my under eyes, I probably pulled too hard and then the skin ripped a bit. And now go into that lighter pink here. Just add some shiny pink color. I now go into Bake and tap this on as inner corner highlight. And here we have now the finished look. For the lips, I used the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk lip liner and I topped that off with the MAC Viva Glam lipstick in the shade Viva Planet. Although in the beginning of this look, I was not very sure if this will turn out good or not, it did. I do not like the lower lash line that much. I feel like with that lighter pink, it turned into orange because of the dark shade that I applied underneath. So I should have used that more neon-y one, but it turned out very pretty. And honestly, that shade for the inner corner highlight, I again just put away the palette. It was called Bake. Yeah, it's Bake. That needs to be a let alone shade for the last look. So let's see if I remember it tomorrow. The last look, I start directly with the black and I apply it here on the outer and inner part of the lid. Now very softly tap into the black with a blending brush and I blend that through the crease and connect these two black spots. I now go into this lighter, slightly cool tone brown and apply this in the transition area to soften this even more. I now go into Bake and I start to tap this here in the center and then slightly on top of the outer and inner blacks. Lining my lower waterline with the Pat McGrath Permagel in Extreme Black. I'm also back in the black eyeshadow and smudge this along the lower lash line. And with that light, slightly cool toned brown, I just smudge it out a bit more. I take this one and I apply this as inner corner highlight. Honestly, I like this really cool fiery contrast. Here we have now the finished look, and aside from a powdered shirt that I now wear, I did on the lip MAC Strip Down lip liner and I topped it off with the Fenty Heat Gloss in the shade Fenty Glow. Is it a surprise when I tell you that this look is my favorite out of the 4? I don't think so, but I have to say, I like them all. The first two looks were a bit too similar in my opinion, although there was a difference between them, but they turned into something very, very similar. But let me tell you that these shimmers, they are special. They are definitely special, but I also have to admit that especially with the first three, there is a tad bit of a learning curve with them because they are so flaky, and I think my favorite is definitely Bake. This shade, that's why I chose it for this look, to apply it all over the lid, because it just needed its own stage to shine and heat, as this disrupting fire inner corner and brow bone highlight is working very, very well. As I told you, the video is not ending just now because you have now 6 short clips of the blush application so that I can show you how the blush palette looks on my face, and after that you will get a finalized review, but then with a different look on the eye. Since the look is very neon-y, very light, I think a more muted color will match. So I'm thinking actually of using Cannoli. I used the Refer 5, picked some up so I see the pigment on the brush definitely. And oh, okay, wow. It's pigmented, but it's not like harshly pigmented. So this is now Cannoli applied on my face, and I really like this. You know what? I go with macaron. So I picked some up, and now let's apply this. That was a good choice. Yes, yes, yes. So this is now the shade Macaron applied. Love that. Now let's apply the shade Red Velvet. I'm very excited for this one. So Refer 5 does it. Tapping it once because this is very pigmented, I guess. And I dab some off. And now I just tap it on both sides of the cheeks. And then I blend it out. This blush is definitely a statement. And I had to dip back in because I applied it uneven. And I take my powder puff that I, well, had some powder on, and I dab it over because there is a bit too much actually. And here we have now Red Velvet on my face. Blush number 4 that I'm going to show you is the shade Strudel, or in German it's Strudel, and it's insanely delicious. I took it as always on the Refer 5, and now I start to apply this on my face. I just dabbed it on, and now I'm circular motion-y blending it out on the nose too, whatever is left. It's insane how far you go with one dab in that pan. The darker shades are definitely much more pigmented than the lighter shades, which usually is the case, but these are pigmented, yes, but they are so easy to blend that you do not really struggle with these. Time for muffin. As per usual, dabbed in, and now, ooh, dab it on. That one is pigmented. Like Red Velvet, very, very strong. And here you have muffin on my face. And now I really want a muffin. Time for the last demo with shortcake. That's definitely very intense pink. And here you have shortcake on my face. All the blush demos are done now. Please don't be confused. You might see this look again because this is my third look from my Nomad Fuji 5 Lakes review. But I told you in the intro that I want to film a demo for each of the blushes. So since I made only 4 looks and there are 6 blushes, of course, some of the blush demos will have a different look. And I didn't want to film the outro before I was done with all the blushes. So today was the last blush demo. So let's now do the final review. And I want to start right away with the blush palette. I'm a fan. I'm a big, big fan of this. This is one of the best balanced and pigmented blush palettes that I own actually. These are matte blushes, so if you are more into shimmery or glowy blushes, definitely not. Maybe then use a bit more of a highlight, but I absolutely adore these blushes. I can't even tell you which one is my fave, but what I want to tell you is that they are insanely pigmented. So have a light hand if you don't want to go over blushed. I saw when I edited the footage, so Technically, aside from the last demo and this outro, the whole video is already edited. And I saw while editing that I sadly, when I used the red velvet shade, it went on patchy. So I had on one cheek some red dots going on because I didn't blend it very well. That one was a bit of a bummer. I love the shade, and on the other cheek it looked fine, but I think it was this one where it was patchy. I don't know. What you saw it. One of this was patchy. But it definitely takes a bit of love. And if you dip in more lightly, you definitely can have non-patchy application. I think it's a beautiful blush palette, and honestly, this might be my favorite of the whole collection. But of course, we also have the Melted Mattes palette. This is a very, very special palette, and I'm happy that I have it, but I also have to admit that I am in general not a neon eyeshadow wearer. Maybe that changes at some point, maybe not, I don't know. I like the concept of this palette. I like the execution here, but I'm not the biggest fan of the matte formula. They do blend okay, most of them. All of them need a lot of build-up. So I already posted a quick review on Instagram on this, and I got some comments from people saying, oh my god, I love that because I want to have mattes that build up. And that is completely fine. So if you are one of those people who wants their matte to build up, who does not want to have color with one swipe or something, this is definitely the formulation for you. I think the formula is different to other Bellabeautebar stuff that I own. I do have the Recently De-Influenced and I do have the Smoky Glam. They are different to this. This one, if I had to rank this quality-wise, in my opinion, is not as good as Recently De-Influenced or the Smoky Glam. I think this is a weaker formulation. But, and here, take it with a grain of salt, because I don't want to build up mattes all the time. I am fine with having punchy mattes. I know how to handle them. But everybody's taste is different, and I'm happy that there is an option on the market that you have neutrals and these super nice neon-y colorful shades without being afraid of over applying and then not being able to blend them. So I see the benefit, definitely, but it's just not the benefit for me. The Molten Chromes palette, oh. Some of the comments that I got, even Instagram messages, were like, this palette is so freaking overpriced. And I just went back to the website, and this 6-pan palette is 55 euro. The matte palette is 33 euro, and the baked blush palette is 28. 55 euro for a multi-chrome palette or a holographic palette means that it is about 9 euro per eyeshadow. I think that's an okay price. A single Cleonette eyeshadow is more expensive than a single of this one. I know they're not sold in singles, but if you want to do the easy math and calculate it down to price per shade, then Cleonette is definitely more expensive. Cleonette is better though, not gonna lie here. Heat, Melt, Molten, very, very flaky shades. Drip, a bit flaky. Bake, the surprise winner of this video. And Dissolve, also a very beautiful shade. I didn't expect to like it that much. I was able to work with the flaky shades, and I realized while editing that I actually did not use Melt in any of the looks. I don't know why I didn't use it. I, for the sake of my life, swore that I didn't use Heat, but I did. So I definitely have to touch into Melt, but I know from swatching that it is just as flaky as Heat and as Molten. And in some other comments, not on my post, but in general on the internet, I saw the argument for this being overpriced is the fact that it's not handmade, that it's made in China. Just because something is made in China does not mean that it is not worth anything. That is just such a common misconception, and honestly, I'm tired of hearing this. Is this collection now worth buying? Honestly, I think you already guessed it. Not so much. I do like it, but the mattes are not my type of mattes that I prefer. I think they're easy to use, and I have to point out that I think that they are quite beginner friendly, especially when you want to dive into colorful makeup. Then this is a good choice. For someone like me who loves to be punched in the face with pigment and color, that's a bit too wishy-washy for me. The Multichrome palette is a beautiful one. Do I see myself using this in the near future? Maybe, if I remind myself of this. I think it's a beautiful collection. I think it's a beautiful curation of 6 shades, but I find them a bit deceiving because especially baked, you saw it in tutorials, it looks nothing like it looks here in the pan, and I have my problems with this, and I don't want to write little labels and write down what kind of shift they have so that I do not destroy any looks. That is a bit yeah, it bothers me a bit, although the end of Bake, like the way it looks on the eyes, is the most beautiful that you will find in this palette. Although I have to admit that Molten, aside from it being super flaky, is a beautiful holographic looking shade. If you never tried any multi-chromes, and if you don't want to spend your money on the best multi-chromes in the market, which is Cleonad, this is definitely a good one to start with. The blush palette gets a definite recommendation from me. If you want to buy just one single thing out of this collection, go for the Baked Blush palette. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful blush palette, and I love every single shade in this. Even Cannoli, the more warmish terracotta one, I love. That review does not sound so positive, but it comes from my heart. It's just my true opinion. And as always, what I maybe criticize is something like the mattes that for you is what you were looking for. Let me please know down below what is your favorite from this video. Have you gotten this palette or anything out of this collection? How do you feel about this? Let me know. If you do not have an opinion on that, or you do not want to rate the eye looks, but you want to comment to push the algorithm, comment bake. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and I can see you in the next one.